Hi there, and welcome to the Plugged In Show. If you've listened to us for any length of time, you know that we think screens are a huge deal. But why? I mean, what's wrong with screens? I use screens all the time, right? So the answer to that question is more complex than you might think, and we've got a couple of huge screen experts today. In that their knowledge is huge, they are not huge, but they are very important people in this space. There are also a couple of podcast hosts, which makes me a little bit intimidated. So let me begin by introducing Melanie Hempe. She is a screen time expert. She's written a fabulous book called Kids, Brains, and Screens, and she helped with Jonathan Haidt on The Anxious Generation, a book that we have talked about plenty on this podcast, actually. She's also a founder of the organization called ScreenStrong, and she leads her own podcast, as I mentioned, which can be accessed on her site, screenstrong.org. How did all this screen expertise come about? She will tell us all about it in just a minute. And of course, we are also joined by Dr. Danny Huerta, who is a psychologist, author, and co-host of his own podcast, Practice Makes Parent. And as Focus on the Family's Vice President of Parenting and Youth, he is also my boss. So if this podcast goes awry, this will be the last time you'll be hearing from Paul Asay. So anyway, later on in this podcast, we'll turn our attention to Bono, frontman of the rock band U2. The group has been around for almost 50 years now, and they've sold more than 150 million records worldwide. Are you guys U2 fans by any chance?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. They were great.
Well, now you might be interested to know that Bono has done a one-man stage show called Stories of Surrender, which is airing on Apple TV+. And as you might have guessed from the title, the show delves into Bono's own sense of faith. We'll be joined by Plugged In's music expert Adam Holz to talk about Bono, the legacy of U2, and of course, his new special. But first, let's dive into a talk about screens with Melanie and Danny. Welcome so much, guys.
Thanks for having us on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
So, Melanie, typically we begin every show with a little bit of an icebreaker where we talk a little bit about something that might be in the news or
Let's
a question.
break the ice.
Let's
Good.
break the ice.
Yes.
So for this, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the unhealthy attachments that tech and screens can have on us, but it's not all bad. And earlier this year, there's a consumer expo that goes on in Las Vegas every year. It's called the Consumer Electronics Show. And every year, some very, very strange gadgets are introduced. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on 3 of these gadgets and see which one, if you had to choose, which one you would really want.
Excellent.
So, the very first one, the Mirumi robot. Now, as far as I can tell, it's a robot that looks like a sloth. It looks very cute. You put it on your purse or your backpack, and because of its sensors, it just looks at people.
That's
and
quite a
then
picture,
it
Paul.
looks away.
A sloth robot.
A sloth robot.
And you said cute. with that.
It's a cute sloth
I mean,
robot.
just-
You got to see the picture. It has these
think I
big
need to,
eyes.
yes.
It has sort of this childlike quality. It turns away, and that's the only thing it does.
You
It
did that
looks at
very
you,
well, by the way.
It turns
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
If you're
good.
watching on YouTube, you can see that.
Yeah, it was a good turnaround. Yeah, that was good.
Second invention, an electric salt spoon. So you put some food on this spoon. You use it like a regular spoon. But the thing is, if you're aware of your salt intake, you want to eat less salt. If you put this food on your spoon, it'll taste salty.
So that'd be interesting with ice cream.
It would be.
Yeah.
Not so ideal with like dry cereal, I wouldn't think.
No, that'd be kind of weird.
That would be
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
and finally, a wearable solar panel. It's
They could
it's a
start wearing that to
vest.
prom, maybe. You know, the kids could.
It's a vest. It has these triangle things. It soaks up the sun. And apparently, if you really need to charge up your phone, you always have your wearable solar panel that can charge it up for
I'm
you.
sure that's super healthy.
Super healthy.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure we're all in favor of that.
Are you carrying your solar panel around? Yeah, I mean,
I have a couple actually,
okay,
just in
okay.
case one just doesn't
This kind
quite
of
yeah.
breaks down.
Exactly. So Melanie, what do you think? If you had to buy one of these things, if someone was twisting your arm, which one would you get?
Well, because I think outside the box a little bit, I would have to say that I'm saving my money for the robot that does my dishes. So you didn't list that, did you?
Yeah, I didn't hear that one. I would go for that one. Yes.
Wait, I think I heard you say that, right?
It was a
Didn't I hear
cute
that?
sloth,
Am I
yeah.
No,
making it up?
I'm sorry, Melanie. That's not on the list. Not on the list.
Okay, well, sorry, but that's my choice.
Man, I tell you what, she's a guest for one time, and already she's taking advantage. Man.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
going to be a
wow.
little different. I'm just going to like.
That was choice D.
Stay in my lane. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
It's a
do think
trick.
a robot that could do the dishes, I'd
That would be
all in
good.
favor.
Now
Yeah.
we're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're
Of course, I have one of those. It's called a dishwasher. But
That's
No.
taking
not
it to the
same.
next
doesn't
level.
not the same?
Paul.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right. All
yeah.
right. So Danny, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I'd go with the salt spoon.
Mm.
That'd be fun
Ooh.
to take with and just
Yeah.
add some flavor without having to take salt around everywhere. Just be a cool thing to bring out. Guys, I got my salt spoon here, and it's mine. I'd engrave my initials on there. I think just to
Would you
make sure
really?
people aren't
Yeah.
using my spoon.
Well,
you know?
exactly, because
Yeah.
they're going to become so popular, right? You don't want them to get mixed up.
Well, in the house, I mean, it's I could just carry that spoon around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
You
I'd
don't
go
wanna
with
be
the
one
salt spoon.
without it.
Well,
Right?
exactly.
true.
You don't want to be the only one. But what happens if you accidentally used it in your coffee?
A little salty coffee.
Salty
Add some
coffee.
caramel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul, what about you? Which one would
So
you?
you know what? I think I would go with the Marumi robot, the sloth,
the cute-
big-eyed thing. Yeah, yeah.
You just carry
Because
that around?
well, I think I would put it in my cubicle. You know, and so if someone came by, they could turn and look at the person and then turn away. It would be that feels a little passive aggressive. Now that I'm
It
thinking
would
about
give a
that.
little bit of a cute feel to your cubicle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it would be both welcoming and yet a little bit intimidating at the same time.
Wow. I think you should walk through Home Depot or Lowe's with the robot and just, saying hi to everybody.
Yeah,
seeing
exactly.
How it goes.
Hey,
Yeah.
very
Hey,
shy.
guys. Yeah, very shy.
But
Yeah,
if there was a
all right.
robot who could do dishes, I would definitely be on board with that. Or
And was
clean my
cute.
gutters.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Gutters need cleaning at my
Paul, that
house.
was random. Gutters?
Yeah.
Just kind of what, I mean,
Well, I
from
was
dishes to
thinking
gutters. What
about
about laundry or something? I don't.
no. We have washing machines for that, right? I don't mind throwing the clothes in the washing machine.
No?
No,
Okay.
no. But cleaning out the gutters, that's a terrible job. That is a terrible job.
What about weeding? I mean,
I think weeding is kind of zen.
okay. Paul, man, I'm learning some things about you.
I actually kind of like weeding. Melanie, are you a big weeder?
Nope, that's why I have kids.
You could just
Okay.
invite Paul, to help out too. Paul, so if I.
Yeah, I'll
no,
come
it's
over.
Zen for you. I'll say,
I'll
hey,
come
I've
over.
had some Zen
Yeah.
for you over at my house.
After I'm done reviewing a movie, I'll just go out,
Yeah, and just
pull
pulling
a
weeds.
few weeds. Yeah,
Okay.
it's great. I really actually do like pulling weeds. But anyway, I feel like this conversation is already getting
Yes.
away from me. So
All right.
let's dive into the conversation that we're actually all gathered here to talk about, the scary science of screen time. So, in a recent study, Common Sense Media found that the average tween spends about 5.5 hours a day on a screen. When they become a teen, that jumps up to 8.5 hours. And this was probably the most shocking stat of all, at least for me. About 1 of every 4 kids has a cell phone by the age of 8. Now, for a lot of experts, these can be pretty alarming. But why are they alarming? Why should we be concerned with screen time? Why should we be concerned with when kids get a cell phone? Melanie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I just want to start with my story really quick because, experience is a wonderful teacher. Our oldest son, Adam, dropped out of college because of a gaming addiction, and we didn't even know what was happening. I'm a nurse. I thought I had this, teenage thing, pretty figured out, I thought, but all through middle school, he started gaming more. And then I became the game cop mom. And then, where you're setting the kitchen timer and doing all that. But I realized later that I was more like the drug dealer because I was just dosing out time that he could play his game. It turns out that certain screen time, not all screen time, our kids certainly are not getting addicted to Excel spreadsheets. I can promise you that. So there is certain screen time that is highly addictive, and video games is one of them. And I did not know the warning signs. I didn't understand what was happening. And when he went to college, he just kept gaming more because that's what happens. They don't binge and go crazy, when you don't give it to them, but they keep doing what they've always done. And so as a result of that, we decided to do things very different for our younger kids. And that's how ScreenStrong got started, because I started diving into the research on exactly what you're talking about today, the science behind screen time. And again, it's not all screen time. It's the toxic, more quick dopamine type of screens with video games and social media and pornography. Those are the 3 areas that we deal with. And the very first thing I did at our school, after I started diving in and learning about all this, they said, hey, why don't we have a little meeting at our school? So I ran over there one week to do a class. We thought we'd have about 20 parents, and we had 125 people show up. And
it just shows the need, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge sign.
Just the need for it. And then, so the first experiment with Adam did not work out so well. So we did a different experiment with our younger 3, and my daughter got a flip phone. And because I thought, well, my goodness, if video games did all this to Adam, like I'm going to step back. And I just want to say right up front to everyone in your audience that I have made more mistakes than anyone listening. So I just want to share some of that today with everyone, and what we did different with our younger kids. And we set a different bar. We just set a higher bar. And so our younger 2 boys, didn't play video games because they kind of saw what happened to their older brother, but mostly because I made this really long list of life skills that I wanted them to learn before they got a phone and before they got games. And one of them said, when they were in the 5th grade, they looked at me with these big brown eyes and said, but Mom, it's going to take me till I'm 18 to learn how to do all this stuff. I said,
And that's exactly right.
Point. Yeah. But let me tell you a really quick, tiny little story about my daughter, because she was in middle school when all this was happening and everybody was getting their smartphone. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do what every smart parent does, and I'm going to ask some parents who have gone ahead of me about the smartphone, because I kind of had the video game thing figured out with the boys. Like, we had been burned. We weren't going to do that again for a while. And so I talked to a mom at a ball game one day. She was sitting on the bleachers with me, and I said, Melissa's in 8th grade. She's about to go into high school. So we're going to get her social media and a smartphone. And oh my gosh, I can't believe I was even saying that. But anyway, so this mom she had 2 daughters in high school. And I thought, what a better person to ask, right? So she reached into her purse and she pulled out a card that was a physician. And she handed me this card and she said, well, this is who we all use. And Melissa will need to get on anti-anxiety medication if she gets social media. All our daughters are on medication.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And here's the guy we use. And
Man.
I mean, I'm like, oh my goodness. I am like so stunned. So I realized, well, do y'all not understand that this is probably a bad idea if your kids have to be on medication, and girls especially? Yeah. And she said, well, no, they have to be on social media. This is the world we live in. And I was just stunned, and I waited. And I did not, there was just this instinct in me that I was thinking, no, this is wrong. I can't give her something that's going to cause that much anxiety. And then when she was 16, right before her 16th birthday, I was out to lunch with some other mom friends who had older kids. And they said, what are you going to get Melissa for her birthday? And I said, well, I'm thinking about a smartphone. And here I am, the screen police, right? And I'm still saying this. And they looked at me. Literally, they stood up and they said, Melanie, whatever you do not get her a smartphone. That was the worst thing we ever did. And long story short, Melissa got a really cute pair of boots that year for her 16th birthday. And that's where I started learning so much more about social media, because I had already been learning a lot about video games. But what happened is just a fascinating, like, last 5 and 6, 7 years about what happened to our family, and then all the other families that have come along this track, because we know that not every screen is good for every kid, and we know that there is a risk, and we just need to teach parents more about the science and about the reasons why. And so what we gained was our kids' attention. We became their guide. We became their coach. And, all the myths that are out there are just really
Yeah.
myths.
Yeah.
We did not lose our younger 3 kids like we lost our oldest son.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, and I have like 27,000 questions that I want to ask you, but
Okay.
before we get down that road, I did want to turn to you, Danny, because as a counselor, probably what Melanie is talking about is not unfamiliar to you.
It's
right?
not. No, I mean, it is unfortunately super common. And there's certain personalities. She alluded to that a little bit. There are certain personalities and certain developmental stages where people are just more prone to or more vulnerable to the effect of what screens bring. And I mean, when we're talking screens, we're talking about computer games, video games, smartphones. And I mean, those are the main ones, the main culprits that are designed to keep us there as long as possible. And
Right.
one of the things that I've noticed also with certain personalities is an addiction to just information, to get more information, to research, and they love to do that. That'd be a surprise for parents, but it actually interferes sometimes with their functioning. But I'll tell you just a couple quick stories to give an illustration. There was a young man in his 20s. It came to my office, and he was close to 430 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And was playing video games probably 11, 12, 13 hours a day, and just said, I don't know how to break free. This is where I find my community. This is where I have found a sense of identity. I love doing it.
And those are important, right? The community,
Right.
the identity, all
Yes.
those things are really important.
Yeah, and so for him, he felt a sense of accomplishment there, but then could barely go up and down stairs. And then there's a young man, similar thing, addicted to video games, very, very small. He was actually closer to 100 pounds, had a huge metabolism, kind of small and short. And he said, in the real world, I'm perceived as weak and insignificant. And in the video game world, he was one of the top, I think, 100 or 1,000 in the world.
Wow.
And he said, I gain respect. People are excited to talk to me. They see me in the gaming world. I am super powerful. And so he was addicted to that, the powerful, the response that he would get in this through this power that he received in the video gaming world. And then recently, there was a family talking about trying to put boundaries on their son's phone use, and use that as a corrective measure, saying, hey, we're going to take your phone from you. A hole in the wall, that he punched a hole in the wall.
Oh goodness.
And there are multiple holes in the wall in the home. And
Wow.
this is kind of one of those tantrums that we would see with a 2, 3, 4-year-old, or a person that is addicted, they can't get the drug that they're wanting. These are the behaviors you see, but then you see it with adults, and it can become really violent
And
between
terrifying.
kids and their parents, and terrifying. So it is a big issue, and we see that there's a direct impact to problem solving, to attention, to a variety of functions that are necessary for kids to function well.
Yeah, I think that's a huge component on that. And I wanted to ask camp on one word that you mentioned, addiction.
Yeah.
Because I know that there may be some people who are listening who say, okay, can you really get addicted to video games? Can you really get addicted to screens? Is this truly an addiction that people have to fight and treat it as such?
Yes, yeah, it's very similar in the pathways to drug use. There's a dependency that is developed over time, and the brain is getting used to responding to certain stimuli where the reward pathway of the brain is triggered and overloaded. Dopamine is released, and in some cases oxytocin as well, so the bonding and the reward pathway. And there's an anticipation of that reward over time where you get flooded with dopamine, and all you can think about is doing that very thing that was the reward. And we know social media, video games, even shopping is created in such a way to create that reward response in the brain. And similar to gambling, where there's just the right amount of algorithm in there to have you coming for more.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And Melanie, sort of on the flip side of that, you have sort of that social media component where you're talking about, instead of getting rewards from social media, you're getting increased anxiety, you're getting increased depression, all that kind of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about why social media sort of triggers some of those emotions?
Yeah, and it is a chemical addiction. And once I realized that, it changed the whole game for us in our home. So just really quick, let me tell you, when I picked up Adam from college, from that last year when he was dropping out, he looked like he was a drug addict. And sometimes the same thing happens with social media. So it is the same pathway that Danny's talking about. That same reward pathway is stimulated with gaming and with social media. So it's very, very similar. Both platforms are highly designed by scientists called attention engineers to get behind there and make these things as persuasive as possible. It's called persuasive design. And so gaming, it's obvious the things that are there with all the music and the themes of the games. With phones, it's still there. In fact, we had so much more anxiety with teenagers the minute that the camera, the front-facing camera button was designed, because now all of a sudden we're putting ourselves out there for judgment every day. And this is highly, highly, highly addictive, and it's very dangerous for kids, because adults, we get caught into this. It's just the lack of transparency. I mean, it's the lack of privacy. Excuse me. It's the lack of privacy. So you can imagine what it'd be like if someone just, knocked on the door, came into your house, went into your kitchen, went into your pantry, or went into your closet. You would be like, oh, no, this is my private place. Well, this is what happens every day with kids. There's no privacy. And so the rejection, pain is felt the deepest, like for a 15-year-old girl, for example. That is the highest point of her life, where she's going to feel the most pain from rejection. And yet that's when we give them social media. They're rejected every day, multiple times. And so this is what causes the anxiety. The depression is really strong among boys and girls, even though boys use social media differently from girls. Girls, it's much more of a serious thing for them. For boys, it tends to be more their gaming. Boys tend to share content on social media. Girls tend to create content on social media. So because they are the creators of the content, they are getting more depressed when it's not accepted the right way. Plus, when you think about social media, when we were growing up, when we were watching TV, it was always the thing to do to hit the mute button when the commercials came on, right? Nobody wants to be bombarded with that. But when you think about social media, even if we're not talking about negative content, which so much of it is, but we're talking about ads all day. Like, our kids are being bombarded with all these things that they should do and things they should buy and people they should become just like, and all the influencers. And that is very stressful. It's very stressful. The content is stressful. The amount of time that they're spending on it is stressful, and what it's replacing. And so every minute your child is on a screen, whether it's good or bad, they are not outside. They are not moving. They are not talking to a human being face to face. They're not listening to their parents. They're not enjoying that life, in the real world. And the more it happens, but it's not just time, it's time and content that is stressful.
That's really true. And I do want to talk a little bit about what it's replacing, because I think that's a really valid point. When you're talking about how much a part of kids' lives, teens' lives are these screens, social media, video games, all that sort of stuff. It's a huge component for many of their lives. So when you have these difficult conversations where you're saying, okay, let's cut down on screen time, let's move the phones out of the bedroom, or even cut them off entirely, you're gonna have some kids who want to punch holes in the wall.
That's right.
Right? So how do you create an environment as a family where you can replace some of that screen time with more healthy, good activities?
Well, and really thinking through that particular scenario, there's a detox that you go through with kids that are addicted. And generally, parents just need to hang in there for a couple weeks where they're going through these outbursts, and the brain begins to reset. And kids do feel much better after that. And Melanie's correct on this whole anxiety piece. Anxiety has gone up, panic attacks have gone up, and there's just so much demand as to what to keep up with, and the comparisons that are there. The other component to it is the continual evaluation of a person, of yourself the whole time. And so what you want to do is create an environment where kids get to explore who they are rather than trying to pretend they're somebody.
That's great.
And so the exploration would be talking with your kids first, saying, hey, what skills and talents do you think God's given you to give away? What are those that you have found so far? And they may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You write those down, and then what are some interests, some things you're interested in? And with my son, I remember asking him, what do you want to be really good at? And he said, I want to be a good drummer. I want to be good at basketball. I want to be good at baseball. He had all these things listed out. And so when he asked me at around 10, when can I get a phone? I said, hey, you told me you wanted to be good at these other things. Let's wait on that. Let's see how it plays out with your friends and the other kids that are getting these phones. And in the meantime, what you're doing is you're taking advantage of this window of opportunity to learn so many things. Kids don't realize, and they need to know this is their window of opportunity to learn some fun things, amazing things. So let's make it fun and let's explore it. And your brain is ripe for taking risk. So let's find healthy risks, and let's explore those. And for you as a parent, you're committing maybe to going to a climbing gym, maybe throwing the ball around, maybe going hiking, maybe learning climbing and rappelling with your kids. It's going to take you back to places where you maybe feel a little uncomfortable, and it'll stretch you as a parent. But it's your participation that shows I'm interested in your healthiness, and you're doing it as a family. And then off of that, your kids may become interested in something that they pursue on their own, like maybe a climbing team or a ski team or whatever it may be, soccer team. But they're learning about who they are, and it's not about gaining people's love and acceptance. It's about giving it away and serving people through that.
I love that.
And you can be talking about that from a real young age with your kids.
Melanie, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is what we do at ScreenStrong. We help parents figure this out. We give you all the tips and all the things to do with your kids. I think the first thing to keep in mind that you need to keep the desired habits, the things that you want your kids to do. You need to make those things easy to do, and then you need to make the things that you don't want them to do harder to do, because practically speaking, we can all read the books and get into groups and talk and have all these ideas, but practically in our homes, we have to change that. In our parent material, we go through every room in your house, and we explain how to make it more kid friendly instead of screen friendly. But little things like hiding the remotes to the TV, keeping music on in the background, keeping reading material out, planning family time, because it doesn't spontaneously happen anymore the way that it used to.
That's true.
Right? But the biggest thing is the education. And I've heard y'all talk about this before in other shows, how important it is to explain the why. And so with ScreenStrong and just with my nursing background, I got really good at simplifying the science behind the reasons why. So parents with our Kids, Brains, and Screens material, it's like now they have the words and they can talk about it in a more of a logical manner instead of an emotional manner. And kids love the facts. They love learning about their brain. They love learning about dopamine and what oxytocin does and what's happening behind my screen. And we don't vilify the tech companies like a lot of organizations. We're just like, hey, this is in the world here we live in. We just got to kind of know what's happening, just like with smoking. When you can explain to kids what happens to their lungs when they're smoking, you've got, a winning situation, because now they have a foundation. So it's not just about having conversations. It's about what are you really talking to them about. But I'm telling you, most parents, including me, we're so busy, we don't even know what's happening on, behind all this technology and what this technology is doing to our kids' brains, and how there's a difference in passive screens and interactive screens. And when kids start to get equipped with that, and as a family, when you can start having those conversations about the science, that the whole mood in your house just changes. And, you know, we even have a dopamine poster that we tell people to put on their refrigerator so you can just show your kids, hey, this activity right here, you know, it's a little too high. We need to go play outside and lower our dopamine or make it more normal, right? So I think it's super important to teach the science. And the best thing about it is you're no longer the bad guy, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Honestly, you know, the truth never changes. And there is so much truth around this issue. And I want parents, you know, just that are listening to just take a deep breath and not be stressed about this. This is not hard. We have done a disservice to our kids for sure. We've put the cart before the horse on many of these screen, you know, activities. We need to let them be kids. And you know what? 48 months of high school, not to have social media and even not to play violent video games is just not, as my son says, it's not that deep, Mom. It's not a big deal. And I think that that's coming from my older teenage boys when they, you know, hit that sophomore and junior and senior year and they didn't have video games. They were so glad because they got to do, Danny, what you're talking about. They got to do their hobbies. And they got really, really good. And they were the senior class president and the student body president. And they got all into the politics at school. And they play instruments and they're really good at their sports. And they started seeing, wow, you know, to be an expert at something, you need to spend 10,000 hours on it. Well, my older brother, like he did that with his game and he has nothing to show for it. And we've done all this other stuff. So I just want to encourage parents not to throw the towel in and not to give up on this. There is another pathway and we have to kind of raise the bar. No kid has ever really had problems when you don't let them have this stuff. You look at medicine and we always err on the side of caution with everything. And if y'all had, like if you came into the ER and I'm working in the ER and you have diabetes or you have a broken bone, I'm going to treat it like the problem that it is. And I'm not going to tell you, oh, well, you can go eat some candy bars, you know. No, that's not the best practice for someone with diabetes. So, and it's not, you know, it's not forever. We have to get our kids through this stage of development. We have to give them the best start that we can. And that's what we failed to do with our oldest son. And he got better. We learned, and, you know, he ended up back in school, 5-year break in the military. And Adam, you know, is relatively fine today, but he will tell you, Mom, first of all, he says, please share my story as much as you can. We got to save more kids.
That's great.
But he will tell you, Mom, I did not like my childhood. And so you got to think about that. You know, what do you want your kids to remember? What are the stories? Are they going to remember y'all at the dinner table talking, or are you going to remember all this conflict over their phone?
Paul, it exposes... for us as parents, I think Melanie is bringing that point in, that it exposes our own anxieties. And so just taking a deep breath and saying, what we need to do is be intentionally involved with our kids. We're not here to make them happy, but to point them towards healthy.
Right.
And in that, we can validate to our kids, if I would have been raised in a digital age, I would have the same exact temptations and vulnerabilities that you would have. I know this is tough. I know it's tempting. You're going to have to trust me on this one. I want some really good things for you, and I want you to enjoy what's in front of you, and I want you to be able to learn how to make decisions on your own instead of a screen making decisions for you. And so just, I'm on your team. I love you. I would die for you. And so I want good things for you. You got to trust me.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a great place, I think, to land this conversation. It is interesting that just as you say, Melanie, just when kids are most susceptible to some of these messages, most susceptible to being hurt by people's opinions, we give them a cell phone, let them turn on social media. And it does seem like as parents, we need to step in the gap, protect our kids, do what we can to help them become the people who designed them to be. So,
Paul, listen to this.
We need to educate them.
Yeah, I love Proverbs 4:23 and beyond is pretty fascinating. So it talks about keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. But then verse 26 says, ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. I don't think screens let us ponder too much.
That's absolutely true.
Ponder where we're going, the path. Ponder the path. It's making the path for us. hey, it opens up great conversations between us and our kids. And so, parents, I encourage you to lean in on this one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you both so much for being here. Melanie, I really appreciate you joining us today, sharing your story, sharing your expertise. If you want to get connected to Melanie and her work, the best place is ScreenStrong.org. The site is loaded with tons of resources and information. If you want to get tapped into the science, it's a great place to start. You have so much information. Definitely, it's a really great resource. And also check out our book, Kids, Brains, and Screens. It's a very, very good book. And I'd also like to encourage you to check out Danny's work. He's done a couple of books now. You're on the podcast all the time. You speak about these issues all the time. And when we're talking about screens, we really need to, as parents, think about them as an integrated piece of the parenting puzzle, right? It's a huge, important piece.
Yes.
But when we're talking about being effective parents, it's really just important to look at the whole thing.
Not a perfect parent, an effective one.
An effective
Yes,
parent.
yes.
That's exactly right. We actually have on the Focus on the Family website, we have Danny's 7 Traits of Effective Parenting Assessment that we would love for you to take.
Sounds intimidating.
It
It's
really
not.
does, actually.
It does a little bit. But yeah, trust me, it's very good. It's a good tool for you to know, a good starting point.
Yeah. And then, of course, as our thanks for joining us today, for listening in, for watching, we'd love to give you a copy of Danny's book, 7 Traits of Effective Parenting. So if you go to the Plugged In Show homepage, check out the show notes. We will tell you how, for a gift of any amount, we will send you one of Danny's books. And it's a great book. I have read it twice now.
Nice, Paul.
Yes,
Wow,
yes.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm now trying to learn how to be an effective grandparent, but that's another story.
Good.
So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks.
The Irish band U2 has been around since 1976, which makes them nearly as old as you and I, Adam.
Oh, boy.
It's really fascinating how long they've been around and how much influence they have had. And what makes them especially interesting is how much Christianity has sort of seeped into the band's work. Frontman Bono, he is a follower of Christ, even as he admits that he is a pretty imperfect one. So now recently, May 30th, Apple TV Plus will air a show called Bono, Stories of Surrender. This felt like a really opportune time to actually look back at Bono and at U2 and sort of explore their influence in the world of music and maybe their influence on Christianity, Christian music. I don't know if we could say that they have influenced Christianity, but maybe they have influenced some of their followers, you know?
Man, there's a lot to talk about here. And I would characterize myself as a medium-ish U2 fan. I wouldn't call myself a super fan. My wife is a super fan.
Okay.
So I have seen them in concert 3 times. So, I mean, I'm probably...
that makes you a super fan in my book.
I guess. Okay. I'll call me a super fan. And, where do you even want to start? I mean, I think that we can start by just talking about the fact that even though rock and roll perhaps lacks the relevance culturally that it once enjoyed in the 80s and 90s, it's not the predominant expression of popular music. These days, rap and R&B have superseded it.
Even country in some ways.
Even country. You've got these generational artists like Bono who are sort of aging like fine wines, right? Maybe that's a weird metaphor, but he's kind of an elder statesman. And in this new documentary on Apple TV, Bono Stories of Surrender, it's an interesting thing because it kind of zigzags back and forth between him performing some U2 songs and then just sitting at a table or at a chair and telling the stories of his life about the influences, the tragedies, the things that happened, and sort of filling in that backstory. And of course, he grew up in Ireland, which was a war-torn country. And I think for us in America, we can't really understand what that means, right? But he grew up during the Troubles, where you had the Catholics and the Protestants literally killing each other. And I think that that shaped him deeply. And so when he talks about struggle, that's the cultural background that he's coming from and kind of the crucible that came up and shaped his storytelling.
Yeah, and they have been, I always find Bono just a compelling figure because
Yes.
I have heard him speak deeply about the Christian influences, not only
Yeah.
in the band, but in his own journey, and I think
Yes.
it's really interesting to see someone who has reached that level of sort of musical superstardom talk so openly and honestly about his faith.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a side story. I know this wasn't probably on your docket. In the late 1990s, I was working for Nav Press, which was the publishing arm of the Navigators, which is a Christian ministry that really helps people to grow deeper in their relationship with Christ. It's a discipleship-oriented ministry. During that time, Nav Press was in the process of publishing The Message, which was Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Bible. And it is a paraphrase. It's not a translation. It's a very loose translation into the vernacular of the day. And Bono loved it. And so U2 came to town, and a whole bunch of people, not me, unfortunately, from Nav Press, went to go hang out with Bono at the show because of the Bible. And it just kind of blew my mind, right? That he fell so deeply in love with this iteration of the scriptures that he wanted to meet the people who kind of brought it to life. And so I think we're on safe ground really saying that Bono has been deeply shaped by the faith. And you can look back through their catalog of songs. You see songs about conflict. You see songs about yearning. You see songs about existential questions, right? Big questions. And occasionally you'll get explicit references to Christ, but it's more kind of in the background,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
not in your face, but it's there. And if you dig a little bit, you'll find those faith elements.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember as just a little kid, there was on TV a half an hour show that would show music videos and Christian music videos. This was an explicitly Christian show, and every once in a while,
Yep.
a YouTube video would appear on there, and that was my really first contact with not only Christian music but with U2.
Yes.
Would you classify U2 as a Christian band?
I probably wouldn't. I would probably classify them as a band that has been deeply influenced by Christianity. One of the members is famously atheistic, but I can't remember which one it is. I kind of think it's Adam Clayton. But the other three have had varying levels of engagement. And I think that there was a moment where they kind of got swept into a very evangelical community. And I think they kind of came out the other side of that, not rejecting their faith, but you see musicians go through these sort of phases.
Sure.
So Bono, as you said, has spoken very plainly about his faith. He's often said things that, feel a little bit universalistic, that people have also raised questions about theologically. Is he really in the fold? It's not my job to make that determination. I think certainly there is an affinity for Jesus in Bono. But to go back to your question, I would stop probably short of calling them a Christian band.
Yeah, and I do think that what you're talking about, when you're talking about sort of how we process U2 sort of within our own context, it seems like sometimes one of the problems that I think we as evangelical Christians sometimes have is that we do really sort of think, is this guy part of the club? Is this
Right.
guy, and faith journeys are just so complex and they're so personal.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we sometimes are very eager to throw somebody up on a pedestal. And
Yep.
if they do something we don't like, to rip them down. And really,
No, that's exactly right.
this is an
That-
easy band to do that with, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that
And Bono would be the first to say that he is arrogant, he's opinionated, he says lots of things, he gets in trouble. Like, I think he would be at the front of the line saying, yeah, I'm a mess. And I think that's part of his appeal, is that he is kind of a mess, and yet I think there is an understanding of grace there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the album All That You Can't Leave Behind. Man, there are some moments that in that album that they orient me toward what is true and orient me toward eternity in a way that not very many bands do. So it's complicated.
It is
And
complicated.
he would be the first to admit that.
Yeah, but I do think that honesty and that transparency is one of the things that attracts us to them, right? But
Yeah.
as we bring this conversation to a close, we say attracts us to them. When we talk about us, who are we actually talking about? I mean, is this a band that is really
We're talking about us.
exactly? Is this a band that has any relevance to teens at all, or are we mainly talking to parents here?
Well, I think that we're primarily talking to Gen Xers. I think the younger you go, they didn't grow up with U2 in the same way that we grew up with U2.
Right.
And so they may not want to admit it, but they are in a category these days that is called legacy acts.
Sure.
And so these are bands that got famous. They were on top of the world. They now have enough money to do whatever they want. They can tour as much as little as they want to. They can go to the Sphere in Las Vegas and camp there for a year, which they did, and it was awesome. I went and saw them. But it was lots of people in their 50s, right? It wasn't teenagers going to see them. I think like a lot of bands that have lasting cultural legacy and relevance, that they're the kind of band that somebody could discover and go deep with and learn, oh man, there's a lot going on here. And they have a long enough career and discography that there's a lot to explore. Whereas I think things come and go more quickly these days.
Yeah, I think you're right. But as you say, their legacy, I know that when I was going to school, there were a lot of people who loved the Beatles. There were a lot of people who got into Dylan, Bob Dylan.
Right.
So once you hit a certain level, and if you have that musical quality that can last, who knows? It might be discovered by future generations.
Yeah, and I think that when you go to see bands that are older, and I actually go to concerts a lot, and you will see some younger people there, but I think that the Gen X audience is probably the core draw and core constituency for U2.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Adam.
You bet.
All right, and now we are going to do a little game. Although it's not really a game, Adam. We are not doing a game today. We are actually going to be doing dad jokes.
Dad jokes,
Because
love
it's
it.
just you and me. So,
Right. Can I do maybe a couple?
oh my goodness. Okay. You do one, and then I'll do one, and then you can do another one. It'll be an
Okay,
extra
I love
credit
that.
one.
I-
Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Your
welcome.
graciousness.
It's
it
the
warms
nicest
my
thing
heart.
I've ever done for you, Adam.
Yeah. Honestly, that was selfless, Paul. Okay. What did one Frenchman say to the other?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm not bilingual. And now you go. That's your turn.
Okay, what is the best time on a clock?
Closing time?
No.
End of the day?
No.
I don't know. What?
No, 6:30, hands down. Get it? The hands
I
point
get
down.
it.
See,
I love that.
that is truly a dad joke because,
That is a dad joke.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, your extra credit.
Okay. What did the farmer say when he lost his tractor?
I lost my tractor.
Where's my tractor?
Oh, I was close.
You were so close.
Oh my goodness. All right.
So my confession is that the best gift one of the best gifts I ever got for my children, in case any of them are listening, I don't want anybody to feel bad here. My daughter Maggie loves dad jokes, and she did a whole pack of them for me for Christmas. So we can just go for a while.
That is the best gift ever. You know what my daughter just
It is
made
the
for
best
me?
gift ever. Tell me.
Made me She crocheted J.R.R. Tolkien's little theme, little symbol that he put at the end of all of his books. Yes, crocheted me this big old thing that I have hanging up on my wall.
That's
So
fantastic.
cool. I might even take a picture of it and put it on the show
Go daughters.
notes.
Go daughters. Because we're focused on the family, so we got to give a shout out to the daughters.
That's absolutely right. Thank you, Adam. And thanks to Melanie and Danny for joining us earlier. And of course, thank you, listeners, for listening and viewers for viewing. We'd love for you to join in the conversation as well. Tell us about how screen time impacts you. How does it impact your kids? Do you listen to U2? Do you like U2? Are you a fan? Are you going to be watching Bono's Story of Surrender? What did your daughter just give you for your birthday? Let us know on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can, of course, always contact us by emailing us at team@thepluggedinshow.com, or you can leave us a voice message at the Plugged In Show homepage. And if you like talking about music, you definitely won't want to miss next week's episode when we dive into what makes music at the movies so effective and so powerful. That's next time on The Plugged In Show.